LA Theatre Works presents Tradition, the highly improbable, ultimately triumphant Broadway-to-Hollywood story of Fiddler on the Roof, the world's most beloved musical, by Barbara Isenberg. Narrated by Adam Grupper with an introduction read by the author. Major funding for Tradition is provided by the Lear Family Foundation and the Jewish Community Foundation of Los Angeles, with additional support from Paula Brand, Fariba Ghaffari, Rachel Goodman, Barry and Marilyn Hinden, Bernard Sobelson, and Joyce Zaitlin. To learn more about LA Theatre Works' catalog of over 450 classic and contemporary audio plays, musicals, and novels, visit us online at latw.org. Our recordings are available as audio plays, audiobooks, ebooks, and apps.
Introduction. On September 22, 1964, after the long-awaited Broadway opening of Fiddler on the Roof, invited guests gathered at New York's Swank Rainbow Room to celebrate. The first review that came in that night was from critic Walter Kerr, and it wasn't very good. But producer Harold Prince read it aloud to his guests anyway. "I can't resist reading this to you," he said that night, "because it's so irrelevant." Apparently so. Nearly 8 years and 3,300 performances later, Fiddler became the longest-running show on Broadway. Winner of 9 Tony Awards, including Best Musical, Fiddler was still on Broadway when United Artists released Norman Jewison's film of the same name in 1971. Rarely off stage, rarely on hiatus, Fiddler on the Roof has already been back on Broadway for 4 revivals, played London's West End 4 times, and remains among Broadway's 16 longest-running shows ever. There have been stage productions all over the world, including 15 in Finland alone, as well as in thousands of schools, community centers, and regional theaters. Whether played by Zero Mostel, Haim Topol, or a high school student in India, Russian milkman Tevye just keeps on worrying about his family, his God, and his poverty-plagued shtetl. Brides, grooms, and wedding planners would be bereft without sunrise, sunset. After half a century, Tevye and company remain unstoppable. Today, Fiddler is a phenomenon, with sing-alongs, tens of thousands of Facebook likes, and enough former Tevyes of all ages and nationalities to populate a dozen shtetls. Why did Fiddler on the Roof, a musical based on 19th century Yiddish stories, become such a hit? What is it that has kept Fiddler pertinent and meaningful to Jews and non-Jews alike for all these years? Fiddler is set in 1905 Anatevka, a shtetl created first by the great Yiddish humorist Sholem Aleichem, drawing on the same Eastern European shtetl life that inspired his contemporary, artist Marc Chagall. It was the Aleichem stories that initially ignited the imaginations of Fiddler's creators, while the show's very title came from Chagall paintings, which also influenced the look and the feel of the show. Working without a producer on what librettist Joseph Stein has called a labor of love, Stein, lyricist Sheldon Harnick, and composer Jerry Bach began in 1961 to craft their musical. The 3 men were all Jewish, all descendants of immigrants from the old country. They wrote it as they would any other show, Bach told me years ago, but, quote, adding those embers that kept burning underneath. When Jerome Robbins came into shape and staged the show, they did what composers, lyricists, and librettists have always done. They rewrote. Stein turned out 5 drafts of the show's book, and the songwriters came up with about 50 songs, of which the show used fewer than 1/3. Their songs, dances, humor, and insights became Fiddler on the Roof, freezing time before pogroms, emigration, and Hitler destroyed a culture and a way of life that had endured for centuries. It surely also revived interest in Aleichem, who died 48 years before Fiddler crossed a Broadway stage. Fiddler was not typical show business fare in 1964. That year, the Beatles debuted on The Ed Sullivan Show, while My Fair Lady and Mary Poppins were hit movies. Both Hello, Dolly and Funny Girl were already faring well on Broadway when Fiddler premiered in September. Fiddler came of age in the 60s, when traditional American values were being questioned amid great social upheaval. The Civil Rights Movement, Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique, and the Cuban Missile Crisis were all taking place. President John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Smoking was declared bad for your health. Nice girls took birth control pills, and nice boys evaded the draft. It was also a pivotal time in world history, with the horror of the Holocaust only 2 decades before. Much as the Diary of Anne Frank is not just a Jewish story, neither is Fiddler on the Roof. Fiddler's strong themes of family, tradition, repression, prejudice, and diaspora continue to evoke common ground for its audiences, wherever they are. Glenn Casale, who directed a 2012 production at the 2,200-seat Sacramento Music Circus, told his actors to turn on the television and watch the heartbreak in Syria. This was his 15th Fiddler production, he says, quote, "And every time I do Fiddler on the Roof, it coincides with something going on in the world, people losing their rights and losing their homes. That's what makes it timeless." That timelessness is similarly captured in Norman Jewison's movie, Fiddler on the Roof. The United Artists film received 8 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, has a score arranged by John Williams, which won the renowned composer his first Oscar, and music for its opening credits, played by Isaac Stern, the most famous violinist of his time. The film that critic Pauline Kael once called the most powerful movie musical ever made has already been seen by 1 billion people, according to its star, Chaim Topol. Production designer Robert Boyle created 1905 Anatevka in the villages of Yugoslavia, while cinematographer Oswald Morris shot through ladies' stockings to get the film's earthen colors and textures. Director Jewison, who had stood in snow up to his knees when scouting locations a year earlier, never encountered any during the entire shoot. Every bit of snow in the film is marble dust. Jewison is candid about his challenges on the film. Among them, casting Tevye, dealing with that total lack of snow, getting phone poles out of his images, communicating with 300 extras, speaking many different languages, and even wrangling geese and pigs on the set. Violinist Stern told Jewison that Marc Chagall's original Fiddler on the Roof was the artist's frequently drunk uncle, so Stern's violin had to be played a little off-key, as the drunken uncle would have played it. Jewison asked actor Paul Michael Glaser to wear brown contacts to hide his blue eyes, and Topol's Tevye talked to a god that was in actuality a piece of white cardboard with a Jewish star on it, attached to a pole, and hung from the camera so Topol would always look at the same place. Topol, an Israeli who brought his family with him to Yugoslavia, held Friday night Shabbat dinners, often including Jewison, a non-Jew, among his guests. Jewison appeared in a documentary of the filming, clearly moved by what he was shooting, wiping away a few tears as he shot the scene where Anatevka's families prepared to leave the land they loved. For so many people involved with Fiddler over the years, the experience has been a powerful one. Austria-born Theodor Bickel, a frequent stage Tevye, has a study filled with books about the period and often instructs his fellow actors about the world they are portraying. Los Angeles-based orchestrator-conductor Larry Blank, who has scored many productions of Fiddler, remembers attending the Broadway production as a child with his parents and grandparents 2 generations of family members who fled Russia.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?